Hey everyone, welcome to the Realtors Toolbox. We've got some great subject matter for you today. We're going to talk about how to choose what offer is the best offer. And of course, we're talking about sellers. What is in their best interest here with these offers? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Haas, our expert on looking at these offers. So Michelle, take it away.
Well, in this kind of topic, yes, we are experts at listing agents, but you know what? Really, our first priority is the seller. What's important to them? What do they need? What do they not need? And when you have a couple of different offers that come in, you're going to weigh in what you have in your lap. What is the most important thing? So maybe to your seller, their most important thing is the bottom line. So you'll talk to your title company, they'll do a net sheet for you, and you'll have everything laid out on black and white. And you'll present it to your seller. Here's the bottom line. These are the dollar amounts. And they just may say, just give me the highest dollar amount. They don't really care about the rest. But there are other things that come into play when a seller is making a decision. So for example, a rent back may or may not be important to that seller. If the property is vacant, nobody cares about a rent back. But if the property is something, they live in it and they might need some extra time, then a rent back is a conversation that needs to happen. So having the seller's best interests at heart is your priority, is their priority. So communicating those things is best.
Absolutely. So I'm going to jump into the next part of this topic, which is the buyer's financing. What about the money to close the deal, right? So you want to make sure if there's any phone call that needs to be made, it is to the loan officer that is on the pre-qualification or the pre-approval letter, which I'm going to cover in a second. But you want to get that lender on the phone and ask them to tell you about the buyer. How well qualified are they? And let them talk. Ask some open-ended questions and just say, tell me about the position that your client is in to obtain this loan. Find out, are they, ask the questions, even though you may already have a pre-approval letter, make them tell it to you verbally. And then it kind of dives into, is it a pre-qual or a pre-approval? Some clients have very complicated income. They own multiple corporations. They've got K-1 statements. There's all kinds of different things that need to be looked at. And so if it's just a pre-qualification, that means it's just been reviewed by the loan officer. Generally, that means they've looked at some income documents, some assets, and credit. And that can be very simple. And it doesn't always need to be reviewed by an underwriter. But sometimes if the client is more sophisticated, if they own multiple companies, they've got stocks, corporations, it can be a lot more difficult to analyze it. As a loan officer, we find that they need to take it to an underwriter in order to get the income properly reviewed to make dang sure that they qualify for that financing. And so that's a really big part of it. And I've kind of covered, like we're looking at income, we're looking at assets here, we're looking at credit. What about confirming the money that they're bringing to the table? We need verification of funds, proof of the money. So somebody can just tell you, they've got the money. But man, if they're putting 50% down and it's $1 million property, it's 500 grand. Where's that money coming from, right? Are they pulling that from some strange account or something they have that's got a long delay? There's lots of things that you're not going to know by just going off of a pre-qual or a pre-approval letter. Call up the agent that's representing the buyer and let them tell you by asking them open-ended questions. Super important to figure that piece out because of all the things that go down in a real estate transaction. Knowing that they've got the money or they're going to have the loan is a big one. And it's a deal breaker if they can't figure it out or if they're trying to figure it out midstream. They hopefully have it all figured out up front so you don't have problems while you're in the middle of the escrow and your seller's counting on them closing. So that pretty much covers that. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was, what about contingent offers? You've got a buyer that's coming in here that's making an offer, but they've also got to sell their home before they can complete the purchase of your seller's property, right? You're representing the seller in the listing. So if it's a contingent offer, you got to know a little bit more about that, right? Do they already have a buyer that has, that they've accepted the offer and they're moving forward? What stage are they at in this process? All of that can make a big difference on how successful your client will be and whether the offer that you're looking at is going to be good or not. Maybe they're going to be a contingent offer, but they've got the sale of their home priced so far out of bounds that they're never going to be able to get it sold, right? You need to know these things up front. So that's where it's going to be important to have a conversation with the real estate agent representing the buyer, especially in that case where, they've got a house to sell and your sellers could be waiting if they accept that, if you don't have some timelines in there and restrict that a little bit so that you can move on without them if they can't perform. So that pretty much covers that. I'm going to pass it on to Lucy Curran.
Yeah,
Hey,
totally.
Before you do,
What's that?
Before you do you
Yeah.
mind if I ask a question?
Yes.
So, as a listing agent, if I called the lender and I said, for example, "Hey, Rich, I see here there's a pre-qual letter for Lucy. Lucy wants to buy this house. Tell me about Lucy." I expect you're going to say everything positive about the client that you're representing as a lender. So what kind of questions can I ask as a listing agent that would help me uncover more?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michelle, and I'm glad that you stopped us and we're
Great
going to
question.
look at that for a second. So here's the thing. If the lender is super excited about their client because they've got great credit, lots of money in the bank, 20 years on the job, all of these things, they're going to come from a position of confidence and they're going to want to brag about their client. There isn't anything negative in there, so they're probably not going to hold back. They're going to be a little more forthcoming with the information than they probably should. Now, if the client is a little more borderline or they don't have everything verified, you're going to kind of be able to tell those things. But the questions that you can ask the lender is, have you reviewed over, all of the income for the past 2 years? Is it all verified? Have you done the verification of employment? That's a big one that the lenders have to do. Very often, they've got to get a verification of employment just to sort out the income. Maybe there's bonuses or commissions or other variable types of income. They've got to get that. So you can ask if they've done some of those steps. Do they have a desktop underwriting approval? Has it been run through the automated underwriting system? You can ask that question. Have their assets been verified? As far as the proof of funds that they're getting, if you don't have a copy of the proof of funds yet, you can ask them, where are the funds coming from to close the transaction? Do you have a copy of the proof of funds? Can I get that from you? They probably won't give it to you, but then you're going to be able to get it from, the other agent. So those are just a couple of things, that you can ask about. You can't ask specifically how much they have and those things. But if the lender is super confident, they may be a little more forthcoming. Their attitude's going to be off the chart. If it's a little more borderline, you're probably going to be able to tell a little bit. So you're looking for that extra enthusiasm. Doesn't mean the client can't qualify if the lender's not super expressive and jumping up and down about their borrower. But those are a few things. And asking open-ended questions. If you can get the agent to tell you, get them to tell you. Hey, tell me about the borrower. How well qualified are they? That's an open-ended question that's going to get the lender talking about their client. And then they may be a little more forthcoming, and that'll help you when you're asking that question of all 5 of the different lenders that are doing loans for the different buyers that have made offers on your listing. So that would be the kind of a long answer to that, but super important question. Thank you for that, Michelle.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I think it's really important. Like anytime you get a lender on the phone, they're like, "Oh yeah, everything's great," and
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't end up to be so great.
Yeah. So it's good to
Absolutely.
ask open-ended questions and see if you can get them talking a little bit. Ask them if they've asked the obvious questions that they probably already really should have answered by providing you a pre-qual letter or a pre-approval letter, but ask them anyway and make them tell you in their own words. It helps you to get a better feel for what's going on.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Rich. And also with Michelle's question, as a listing agent, it is pertinent that you most definitely will ask the buyer's agent for proof of funds to start with. That's one of the major requests, actually, that my transaction coordinator always either asks for or gives if we are on the buying side,
Yep.
to lock in the would you say the trust, right, between
Yeah.
both parties
Yep.
in the offer. So as a listing agent on the selling side, you also have to consider, like, what's the relationship, right? And just like, just to add on to what you were saying, Rich, earlier, I mean, if there's no loan, nobody gets paid, guys. Nobody. So it's very important that you get to know the lender a little bit yourself too.
Yeah.
Because
And one final comment on that
Mhm.
is, you're going down the timeline has started as soon as,
Yes.
that offer gets accepted. So if you haven't figured those things out, and then you figure out down the road in the 30-day escrow period or however long it's going to be that you've got problems, hopefully that's why you're asking these questions up front, is so that you can avoid those situations, because now your seller's losing time. You could lose
Absolutely.
2 weeks, fall out, and now you're going back on the market and you're back to square one. So
Absolutely.
anyways.
And that loan right there can really, tick people off in the transaction. Okay. But yeah, I mean, it will upset the seller. It can upset the listing agent. And then from that point on, it's just a SHIT show. But yeah, I mean, who's the buyer's agent? You got to get to know who the buyer's agent is, right? Their relationship, build a relationship with the lender as well. Because I mean, I've been on the buyer's agent. I'm a buyer's agent too, and it's hard. I don't have control over the lender. So it's also the seller's responsibility to have, as a listing agent, to also have a relationship with the lender as well. So you can go ahead and speak to them in regards to keeping track of where the loan's at, when it's going, where in that loan, and the stage that is in during the time before the close of escrow. So you as well aren't coming up with concerns in case it happens to be that your seller's asking and worried, because sellers always have the worry of, oh my gosh, is this going to go through, and asking you tons of questions. So you just want to be on top of it all to let them know, and put them with ease and grace, letting them know, hey, everything is good, everything is flowing well. I have a relationship with the lender. And on top of that, I have a relationship with the buyer's agent too, and everything seems to be on track. So, and then as for the buyer's agent, I mean, what we look into as for listing agents is just with any transaction, but communication is key. Okay, because we don't want any lack of communication, because then there could be possible, oh, well, what happened here? Well, I didn't know. Well, you didn't tell me this, right? And we want to go ahead and just exclude all of that by just completely being transparent, making sure that you have a relationship with the buyer's agent, making sure that everything is crystal clear amongst what the buyer is doing to the lender, and as a listing agent. So, again, you will then be the messenger to your seller saying, hey, everything is going well, there's no problem. And, at the end of the day, this is not about the listing agent. This is not about the buyer's agent. It all falls back down to you doing what's right ethically, with integrity, with your clients, for your buyers and for your sellers. Okay. So, and then that's what I have to say with that. And I will end it off with, just don't be pushy. Okay. We're all on a timestamp, and everybody is doing their job. As long as everybody communicates, and if time lapse, it's okay. You don't have to freak out. Just go ahead, just communicate it, and everything should go just fine. So.
That's great, Lucy. And I'd like to kind of just wrap up a little bit, just chatting about, what about difficult agents? What about agents that end up, in your transaction, or they're trying to, represent a buyer, and they're coming to the table, and they're difficult to deal with. They're hard on sellers. They kind of are a little bit of a deal breaker, sort of a personality when they come into these transactions. they're not professional, their reputation kind of precedes them, that maybe they're a little bit of a jerk and nobody really likes them that much. You know, and they can push your sellers around. And what kind of a transaction do you want to have? And you know, so I think there are agents out there that, you know, don't do a good job in representing buyers, and they think yelling and screaming and being unprofessional as a realtor is a way to, you know, get to the end of their goal for their buyers. But the reality is we want to be professional in every situation, and
Absolutely.
we want to be professional, and our reputation matters amongst our peers in real estate. So we need to be operating at the highest level in every area. But if you see multiple offers coming over and you see an agent that you know they are a piece of work to deal with and that they can wreck deals, you know, it may be a little bit of information that your experience is going to cause you to want to share with your sellers in choosing that offer. That's not to say you aren't going to end up in the deal with them. Maybe they do have the most favorable terms or the most money or different things that make it work, but you want to make sure your client knows what they're getting into with somebody like that. And we've had buyers and sellers that are upset with agents and how they have handled themselves in these transactions. I don't know, Michelle, you want to jump on that bandwagon at all?
Well,
I mean,
I'll add to that real quickly too, is that at the end of the day, when you get that far down, you have a really, really hard buyer's agent that's doing that and not actually serving their client. Sometimes as a listing agent, you kind of have to play the devil's advocate as well and help out the buyer, even though their agent isn't cooperating as well too, because I've done that before. Sometimes you kind of have to take the beating, you know, in some cases. So I'll just add on.
Yeah, and this whole video is about how to choose the best offer. And I think you're right, Rich. I mean, we're basically describing how are you going to stand in your seller's corner? How are you going to protect them? How are you looking out for them? And if that means your seller needs to understand that the buyer's agent has a reputation for a lot of anger or a lot of swearing, or is a super negotiator or whatever it is, I hate to use those things against somebody when those could have been one-time things, but if you knew and you didn't say anything and then your seller has an experience that is terrible, that's on you. You knew. So protect them, whatever that means.
Absolutely. Which is why it's so important to go back to all of us being super professional in every area of a real estate transaction, because you do build a reputation and people don't forget. Agents do not forget how poorly other agents have acted in transactions. They will remember, and they may have a bias against you. So super important as an agent to do that. And so I think that might be a wrap on this one. Any final comments? This is how to choose the best offer. Certainly, you're going to want to coordinate with, you know, your escrow officer, you know, on the net sheet and looking at all those things. But you're going to have lots of other things to consider that we've covered in this topic. So that's a wrap.
It's a hot topic. I tell you, it's a hot topic.
It's a hot topic. And you're going to want to look for another video that we've done. How long will this take? In referring to transactions, how long will a transaction take? Very interesting. But look for that. This is the Realtor's Toolbox. We are here for you. Thanks for being with us. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.
See you later.
Bye-bye.